Welcome to In His Grip with Dr. Chuck F. Betters of markinc.org. Visit markinc.org, where you'll discover many free resources, videos, devotionals, and more that will equip you to walk by faith and offer help and hope. You can also find out about our online biblical counseling service. That's markinc.org.
The reason sometimes our children rebel and fall away is because they have been conditioned to quit. They've been conditioned that when the hamstring of their soul is pulled, to lay on the ground and writhe. Did you see what he did when he fell on the ground? He looked back, and then he looked forward. He was standing there, laying there, and making a choice. He was deciding. You could see the mechanisms working in his brain. This is where I came from. That's where I'm supposed to be. Here is where I am, laying on the ground. I will not quit. And he made a conscious choice that even if I have to limp to that line, I am going to finish this race. This is what I trained to do. They lose, our children, oftentimes because we teach them to lose. Today you're bruised and in pain. Maybe you're carrying a lot of baggage and you feel like giving up. We say to God, I'm bruised. I'm weighed down. I'm on the verge of giving up. Many wounds are open. I'm in pain. I feel so dry. I hurt so bad. I am so troubled. It feels awful. Is there anybody in the stands who can lend me a hand? Either kick me, knock me down, or pull me up. I can't imagine what I will become if I quit. Help me. Is that a prayer that you've prayed? You see, moral failure occurs in those who have never been taught how to finish well, how to complete the race. They always look for shortcuts. They look for the pain not to be there. They want it easy. They want quick solutions. And they lack the discipline because they've learned it oftentimes from watching you in your own spiritual battles. Moving beyond that, moral failure occurs in those who have never been taught in practical terms how to stand alone. When everybody else drops down on their knees and bows before Baal, they've never been taught to stand alone because they've watched as mom and dad have not had to stand alone. How often does a friendship with the wrong people loosen good, solid, moral, biblical instruction? How often have I seen over the years parents who have raised their children around key biblical principles only to have all of it damaged, all of it threatened because of one bad relationship, one bad friendship, one bad apple that infects them tremendously? There's a pattern here. People who conform to evil will eventually become evil. And then they will lead others to do the same evil. When we refuse to stand alone and we conform to those around us, we will become just like those around us. And then we will lead others to become exactly what we have become. It's a pattern. We are not to avoid evil when we are near it. We are to avoid the nearness to it. That's what these Proverbs are teaching us. Don't go near the evil. Don't wait until you're face to face because you've trekked over into their territory. Don't even go near. Learn what the red lights are. Learn what the yellow lights are. Learn that harm is just around the corner. Kids are not to plead with us, what harm is there in this, or what harm is there in that? That's not what children are to plead to you. We must be prepared to tell them that they are drinking poison, and that poison kills. We have ample examples of scriptural characters who dwelt too close to the line, don't we? Like Lot. Remember the story of Lot? Lot had a choice to make. He sat down with Abraham, who was passing out the inheritance, so to speak, and he gave him a choice. What land do you want? Look around you. What land do you desire? And he could have made all sorts of choices, but what choice did Lot make? He said, I want to go live in Sodom. That's the land I want. Really, what he's saying as we assess the story is, that's the lifestyle I want. I want to be where the glitz and the glamour is. I want to be where people are partying and having fun, and it cost him dearly. It cost him his own life, his own wife's life. What that wonderful story about fleeing the city because the angels were coming to judge the city. What that story teaches us, when God made it very clear through the angels, when you leave, don't look back. Have you ever seen a sprinter win a sprint by looking back? There he is trekking down the 440 or whatever he was running. There he is, and he stops for a moment and turns around to look back at where he used to be. How practical do you think it is for that man to think he's going to win? When you turn back, you turn to salt. When you turn back, you die. We have practical examples of people like Dinah. Remember that story? The sister of the children of Israel. She got herself entangled with the enemies of the covenant people. She was flirting too close to the danger, and she got raped. And there follows a blood flow, a picture of vengeance and bloodshed as the result of her dwelling too close to where she had no business being. Or what about Solomon, the man who wrote these Proverbs under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, who loved many strange women that led to his downfall? Or Peter. Right before the crucifixion, where do we find Peter? Sitting at the fire, warming his hands with the sinners, chit-chatting back and forth, hiding or lurking in the shadows. And there is where he denied that he even knew Christ. Let these characters and many others warn us and warn your children. It follows a pattern. It begins with evil company. It begins when they love to be the companion of fools. Then that evil company is loved, and like it's the picture of the farmer who goes out into his yard, out into his farm, and he sees a bunch of buzzards. And he wants to scare the buzzards off, so he begins to shoot. He's shooting away at the buzzards only to kill a beautiful parrot who was hanging out with them. The Bible tells us the companion of fools, the buzzards, will be destroyed. The parrot. Are your children dwelling among the buzzards? Are you dwelling among the buzzards? You need to teach your kids to avoid liars, to avoid enticers, to avoid those who actually entice them to come out from underneath your authority. One of our children, later in their teenage years, actually pretty close to adulthood, was involved with someone that I and their mom did not agree with. And we sat the two of them down and we said, this relationship is now over. It ends here today. Well, when that particular child turned out to be 18 years of age, that other person came to them and said, now that you're 18, Your parents have no authority over you. Now we can be together again. And to this child's credit, was able to see right through all of that. The companion of fools will be destroyed. You know, they must learn to stand alone when not standing alone is going to harm somebody. Look at Proverbs chapter 1 and verse 10. It says, Proverbs 1 verse 10, it says, "My son, if sinners entice you, do not give in to them. If they say, 'Come along with us, let's lie in wait for someone's blood, let's waylay some harmless soul. Let's swallow them alive like the grave and whole like those who go down to the pit. We will get all sorts of valuable things and fill our houses with plunder. Throw in your lot with us, and we will share a common purse. My son, do not go along with them. Do not set foot on their paths. For their feet rush into sin, and they are swift to shed blood. How useless to spread a net in full view of all the birds. These men lie in wait for their own blood. They waylay only themselves. Such is the end of all who go after ill-gotten gain. It takes away the lives of those who get it." What's he telling him there? You must learn to stand alone. When not standing alone is going to cause someone else great harm. That's the picture of someone laying in wait to hurt another. Or in Daniel chapter 1 and verse 8, it says that Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. And he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. You see, what the king was asking Daniel to do was to sacrifice and compromise his moral convictions about the foods he was to eat. Daniel said, "No, I am forbidden to eat these foods. These are the underpinnings of who I am. This is the foundation of my faith. And although I'm living here in this strange land and away from home, I cannot eat that food because it will defile me." And he refused to accept the challenge of these immoral people. You see, we must learn to stand alone, and your children must learn to stand alone when their moral convictions and the underpinnings of their faith that you've taught them are compromised. They must learn to spot that. They must learn to see right through that, the red lights, the yellow lights. Hey, this person's compromising me. They're asking me to do something that runs against the grain of my moral convictions, and I can't go there. You see, not all jokes are funny. Your kids must learn to stand alone even when practical jokes that are going to harm someone are thrown at them. Look at Proverbs chapter 26 and verse 18. Proverbs 26:18. You know, they must stand alone when practical jokes are not funny. 26:18 says, "Like a madman shooting firebrands or deadly arrows is the man who deceives his neighbor and says, 'I was only joking. I was only joking.'" Now, this is not a treatise against a good sense of humor. It's not a treatise against having fun. But sometimes in the process, with children especially, having fun by poking at another causes great harm. That's the stuff bullies are made out of. They must stand alone when faced with violating what they know they were taught. That's why he says in Proverbs chapter 19 and verse 27, he says, "Stop listening to instruction, my son, and you will stray from the words of knowledge." Stop listening. Stop reading. Stop studying. Stop sitting under preaching. Stop sitting under teaching. Stop sitting under the provocative word of Scripture. Stop it, and you will go astray. The moral restraints will be lifted, and we must warn our children You know, we're even told in Scripture that we need to teach our children to stand alone when it comes to fashions. Do you know that? They must learn to stand alone when conformity is knocking at their door. Romans 12 verse 1 says what? Therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Your children probably know what the latest fashions are. They probably know what they're being pressured to look like. And the challenge of Romans 12 is this: their minds need to be renewed, which means very simply, they need to think differently. They need to look at it from the outside. They need to step back, take a deep breath, and look at what they're being asked to conform to. I know I can become very legalistic if I'm not careful, and that certainly is not my intent. But modesty is scriptural. It is a violation and a sin against God to dress immodestly. And when their moms do it, why shouldn't their daughters do it? Well, everyone else is doing it. Everyone else is dressing this way. 2 Corinthians 6:14 says, do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness? Listen to me closely. This is a clear-cut warning against what I like to call missionary dating. I like this guy, or I like this girl. Sure, they're not a Christian. They don't know the Lord. They don't go to church. They weren't raised the way I was raised, but I really like them. And oh, by the way, over the course of time, I am sure that I can persuade them to see my faith become their faith. That's called missionary dating. It doesn't work that way. If you're here spiritually and they're here spiritually, your missionary dating theology says, well, over the course of time, they will become just like me. They will rise to my level. And you know what really practically happens? Just the opposite. They don't come from here to here. You go from up here to down here. And the Proverbs continually warn us against missionary dating. Paul would say in Corinthians, what fellowship? What common ground? If your souls cannot be united, if your hearts cannot be blended together, what future is there? What do you have in common with the unbeliever? If there was one thing over the course of our many years of ministry I could wave a magic wand and convince people not to do, it would be missionary dating. If I could just warn them, and then by that warning cause them to listen, that's what I would do. What fellowship does light have with darkness? Your kids must learn to stand alone when yielding to peer pressure. And by yielding to that peer pressure, in the process, they might violate civil authority. Kids are encouraged to do this all the time. Parents don't really realize what's going on. It's not just a matter of a practical joke any longer. When they become older, it's a matter of doing things that are illegal. Romans 13 says, everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, he who rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror over those who do right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right, and he will commend you. For he is God's servant to do you good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword for nothing. He is God's servant, an agent of wrath, to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but also because of conscience. How many more times are your kids going to wake up, turn on the TV, and read about some new sports star or some new entertainer who, by the way, have never been told no? These sports stars, many of them, have never been told no. They've always learned that whatever they want, they get. And with millions and millions and millions of dollars in their contracts, and millions and millions and millions of dollars in their movies, these entertainers and these athletes, these heroes for your kids, are regularly and consistently pulled over in violation of the law. Drinking, driving, even carrying weapons, holding up stores, stealing, shoplifting. What in the world does someone have going through their minds who makes millions of dollars every year? What is going through their minds when they go into a store and shoplift a scarf? Because they've never, ever been told no. You know, even Matthew 4:6 tells us that your kids need to learn to stand alone when they hear, now I'll put it this way, when they hear this, I double dog dare you. Take you back a little bit. I double dog dare you. How often kids succumb to that? I mean, it's nothing new. Matthew 4:6 tells us that Satan took Jesus to tempt him and said, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down. I double dog dare you. Because the scripture says he will give his angels charge over you to lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against the stone. Jump! Jump! It's nothing new. The many voices that whisper in your child's ears. Now, moral failure follows a progression. Go back to Proverbs chapter 4 and look at verse 20. See if you pick this up. There's a progression. You know, Scripture's inspired, but even the order of the words are inspired. God puts words in a particular order for a reason. Look at Proverbs 4, verse 20. See if you pick it up. My son, pay attention to what I say. Listen closely to my words. Do not let them out of your sight. Keep them within your heart. For they are life to those who find them and health to a man's whole body. Above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. Put away perversity from your mouth. Keep corrupt talk from your lips. Let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. Make level paths for your feet. And take only ways that are firm. Do not swerve to the right or to the left. Keep your foot from evil. Did you pick up the progression? Verse 23, guard your heart. Verse 24, guard your lips. Verse 25, guard your eyes. Verses 26 and 27, guard your feet. Now those concepts mean something. To guard the heart is the starting point. If the heart is well guarded, it is likely your children will not morally collapse. The heart is the seat of our core principles. It's our values, our issues of life, things like parents and God and life choices and associations. In one word, it's attitude. It's how you're thinking. It's your worldview. It's attitude. What's your child's attitude look like? What's their heart look like? Our tongues or our lips are the measuring stick of restraint. Have you ever noticed how when you've spoken a word in ill fashion, you wish you could just grab it and pull it back, but it's too late? If you let a man talk long enough, you'll know what kind of moral restraints he does or does not have. The speech betrays us. Our tongues are to be guarded because they're the measuring stick of restraint. If the lips are not restrained, neither are you. If the heart is not right, it will show up in the lips. It will show up in what we say. When the attitude is wrong, the restraints are gone. Outlets of sin spring from bad attitudes. That is why we must keep our lips under a heavenly restraint. That's called discipline. When the attitudes are wrong and the restraints are gone, the eyes are left unguarded. The eyes. That's why the writer of the Proverbs says that I've made a covenant with my eyes, that I will not look lustfully upon a young woman. I made a covenant with my eyes, that I will not look lustfully. You know where that covenant came from? It came from the heart. It came from attitude. It came from worldview. Because if the heart is wrong and the lips or the restraints are unguarded, the eyes begin to roam, and then your values change. That's why he says in verses 26 and 27, guard your feet. Guard your feet. The eye in Scripture is symbolic of your life goals. It's your purpose. It's your vision. If your eyes are not looking straight, if your eyes do not have a singleness of purpose, then your feet will begin to wander. You'll begin to go in directions you have no business going. So it starts with the heart. It eventually comes out of the lips. The eyes begin to wander, and the feet go astray. That's why the writer of the Proverbs tells his son this: listen to me. I beg you, listen to me. Get wisdom. Get knowledge. With all you've got inside of you, pursue it with everything you have. Listen to the words of my mouth. You can almost sense the father begging this child to get the big picture. That's attitude. If the attitude is not right, eventually the eye is not right. And the eye, being the lamp of the body, makes the body full of either light or darkness. Guard your feet, he says. Because you see, if the attitude's wrong, then the restraints are lifted, the goals and vision for the future is blurred, and finally, spiritual direction for specific problems is actually hidden from them. They don't have a clue as to what to do. They end up marrying the wrong person, living a life in misery because they didn't listen. You know, moral failure usually occurs in one of three social environments. It either occurs in friendships, or it occurs in school, or it occurs in dating. Those are the three critical circles, social circles that kids run. Their friends, their school, and who they date. Now, there's a lot we could say about each one of them. In terms of friendships, I think it's important for parents to test the chemistry of a friendship. Now, I want you to listen to me closely. Just because your child's friends are Christians doesn't mean the chemistry is right. That should not be the only measuring stick for whether or not you are going to allow your children to be friends with certain people because they just say they're Christians, or they go to the same church, or they go to the same Christian school, or they're raised in the same homeschool process, and you stand back and say, well, they're Christians. What's wrong with this? It's not always in your child's best interest because the chemistry is not good. There have been times over the years as we raised our children where we've had to say to parents who were under my pastoral care, members of the church, your kid and my kid are not good together. And for that reason, the relationship is over. I've had people leave the church over that. I've had people stand up and say, well, he thinks he's better than us. No, I just know the evil that exists in the heart of every child, including my own. And when the chemistry is not good, when the chemistry is not right, parents, listen, you need to be the person who chooses your child's friends, not your kids, because fools gravitate to fools. Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. You put them all in the same room or in the same school or in the same context, you have a bunch of fools running around. And you have the parents standing out there saying, isn't that cute? I can't tell you over the years how many parents have said, you know, I'm disappointed. My children were raised in such and such Christian school, and the kids there are no different than the kids in the public school. And that's true. Why? Because the kids in public schools are fools. And the kids in Christian schools are fools. The heart is the same. It's when the chemistry between them is wrong that you need to intervene. Or you must test the instruction of a teacher and test the curriculum. What's that school teaching your kids? They're there for 6-7 hours a day, sitting under someone you probably have only met once or twice. What are they telling them? Have you read their textbooks? Have you listened to what they're being taught? Do you talk it through with your kids? What instruction is that child being given, not only in the classroom, but on the playground? What's being fed into their heads that undoes a lot of what you have done? In just a moment, it can all be undone. But then there's this thing called dating. And I want to give you what I believe are the 10 commandments of godly dating. I want you to listen closely. I'm not going to elaborate too much on each of these. But your kids have no business dating unless these 10 commandments are followed. Number 1, their dating life must be rooted in a solid biblical worldview that serves as a grid through which the relationship is evaluated. Your kids need to be thinking right. And if they're not thinking right, they're not ready to date. If there isn't some worldview that is at the heart of why they think the way they do, the grid through which they work, then they're not ready. They're not ready to date. Number 2, they and their date must give evidence that they are both under spiritual authority. Not just your child, but their child as well. Are they under spiritual authority? Number 3, dating must be balanced with every other area of their life so that it does not become all-consuming. There needs to be balance. If that's all they can think of, I need to go to the mall. I need to go to the movies. I need to do this. I need to do that. And you see that worldview being skewed, and you see that there's no balance. They're not interested in other things anymore. They're not interested in reading. They're not interested in tilling up the soil of their minds. They're not interested in the things of Christ. All they're consumed with is, I've got a date. I've got a date. I've got a date. Then you know they're not ready. Number 4, steady dating. Steady dating should only be permitted after a wealth of experience has proven that your child has a teachable spirit. Is your child teachable? Why would you throw them into the context of a relationship that can destroy everything they believe in? Because they're not teachable. Are your kids teachable? And does the wealth of experience that comes with that teachability prove beyond any shadow of a doubt they know how to think? They know how to respond. Next, every dating relationship should be done in groups only and never alone early on in the relationship. You give a 455 horsepower car to a teenage boy who's never driven a car before. You put him behind the wheel with all this power, and you say, now, son, you will not go over 25 miles per hour. Yeah, right. So you're going to take all this pent-up energy, all this sexual energy, all this emotional energy that grows every day of his life and peaks when he's around 18 or 19 years of age. And you're going to sit him in a car with this beautiful girl who's dressed immodestly, whose values are all messed up, and you're going to say to him, "Here, son, now behave yourself. Keep your hands where they belong. Keep your eyes where they belong." He's going to say the same thing to you that he would say if you put him behind the wheel of that 455 horsepower engine. Yeah, right. Is he teachable? Is he supervised? Every dating relationship should be approved in groups only, early on, and never alone. Next, the dating relationships should be supervised to minimize alone time, even in your own house. Now, that doesn't mean you're sitting there the whole time. That doesn't mean you're sitting between them the whole time. That's not what I'm talking about. But you need to know what's going on all the time, even in your own home. You need to know where they are. You need to know what they're doing. You need to know who they're with. You need to know when they're going out, when they're coming back. You need to know every detail, and that should be strictly enforced. Strictly. No bending. No compromising. You see, there are 3 concentric circles that form a marital love. Marital love is made up of 3 concentric circles. The inner circle, the word for love that's used there is called agape. The Bible has 3 words for love. Shows us the 3 stages of a good relationship. The inner core, the inner word is agape. That's the core of who you are. That's your soul's spirit. That's the love of God. That's where everything else flows from. That's where the attitude is birthed. That's where the teachability exists. That's where the mindset is worked through the grid of a worldview that honors God. And that's the love of God. That's the kind of love that only God can give them. But then there's a second circle outside of that. We simply call that word phileos, or emotional or brotherly love. It's a relationship that extends out of the agape love. It flows out of the heart and into the emotions. And then there's the outer circle called eros. We get the word erotic from it. That's sexual love. Where do kids usually start? Where's the beginning point? What's on their minds from day one? Eros. And the order is reversed. You see, the pattern of dating should go something like this. You first of all learn the character of a person. You learn where they stand in relationship to the Lord. In other words, you become close spiritual friends before you allow the relationship to become deeply committed emotionally. And ultimately, it is consummated only within the context of marriage or the context of sexual love that is reserved only for marriage. You see, sexual love, according to 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and 1 Corinthians chapter 7, is an expression of spiritual love. A man and a woman involved in an intimate marital relationship are worshiping God. Did you know that? It's an act of worship. It's before your wife is your wife, brother, she is to be first your sister in the Lord. That's a higher relationship. That's why when you go to heaven, there is no marriage. Marriage is an earthly institution. Eternally, there is no marriage because there's a deeper relationship that exists between a man and a woman, and that's soul to soul, brother to sister. And in the context of the dating relationship, your children must be taught to move outside of the center of their love, which is agape love, to see whether or not it deserves to go to phileos love or eros love. So it might start with a dating relationship or a friendship that becomes an engagement, that becomes marriage. But when we reverse the order, we mess up. 3 more very quickly. There should be a two-sided parental involvement and communication to ensure there is full knowledge of any and all yellow lights before there are red lights. Notice I said two-sided parental involvement. It's not just a matter of you getting to know your kid's date. It's getting to know who raised that child. What values did they raise that child with? After all, you're going to allow your child to get involved in a relationship that could damage them for the rest of their lives. You need to know what values they were raised with. So it's two-sided. Number 9, there should be a short leash that can become a long leash before there is no leash. The size of the leash will be determined by the trust that is earned. When they first start out, the leash needs to be tight and short, very tight, where you can hit the little puppy on the nose with the newspaper. Then later, you can lengthen the leash so long as the dog or child is walking closely beside you. And then eventually, you don't need a leash because the child has learned not to sway. The child has learned not to move to the left or to the right. So I say, there needs to be a short leash that can become a long leash before there is no leash. And the size of the leash will be determined by the trust that child earns. And then finally, there must be an observed, marked, spiritual improvement in both of these kids as the direct result of the dating relationship. In other words, he should be a better Christian because of his involvement with this girl, and vice versa. You should see more maturity out of them and not less maturity. It's when you see your kid going south spiritually that you know the dating relationship is wrong. All 10 of these commandments involve work. You don't just post them on your kid's wall. You post them on his heart. And then there has to be the accountability to make it happen. Moral failure is going to come in one of 3 contexts. It's going to come in their friendships, it's going to come in school, or it's going to come in dating. And that's where parents need to learn what a yellow light looks like and what a red light looks like. See how practical the Proverbs are? And we are in danger of raising a whole generation of people that don't know the Proverbs.
You've been listening to Dr. Chuck F. Betters in this program brought to you by MarkInc.org, proclaiming the truth that God is sovereign and you can trust Him. Please visit us online at MarkInc.org to learn about other free resources, such as our Help and Hope personal stories addressing a variety of topics and difficult circumstances. Hear answers to tough questions about suffering and the sovereignty of God in our Ask Dr. Betters video series. Receive encouraging devotionals from Daily Treasure, and more. Looking for help? We now offer online biblical counseling service through Anchored Hope Biblical Counseling, an online platform that will bring solid biblical counseling to those in need wherever and whenever they need it. Visit biblicalcounseling.online to make an appointment today.